The UN Secretary-General, António Guterres, says global action on climate change now will save the planet from widespread destruction.
He spoke in a CNA exclusive interview with Liling, the co-host of our Climate Conversations podcast. She asked him how concerned he is about the record-breaking temperatures and extreme weather we've witnessed in Southeast Asia.
I'm terribly worried, but we need to avoid that situation. We need to make sure that temperatures do not rise more than 1.5 degrees until the end of the century in relation to historic values. And that means that we need to reverse the present trends in which emissions are still growing, and we need to ask countries, especially the G20 countries, the great polluters, 80% of the greenhouse gases come from the G20. We must take the G20 countries, developed countries, emerging economies, that it's time to start drastically reducing the emissions. It's time to start a process to phase out fossil fuels, and it's time to understand that we need to rescue our planet, and that the only way to rescue our planet is exactly to avoid the things that you are describing. If temperatures rise 2, 3, 4 degrees, we will witness the destruction of large parts of human life conditions in different areas of the world.
You're in the midst of your Asia trip now, and you've already visited Samoa and Tonga. What did you hear and see that you were most alarmed by in terms of the impact from rising sea levels? Sea
level rise is, first of all, at a double than what it was in the 90s, and it's accelerating. I think the rate of increase is unprecedented in the last 3,000 years. And the drama is that we are coming close to a tipping point where it can accelerate much more. If, for instance, we would have the 2 degrees as a limit, it would be inevitable to have the long-term melting of Greenland and the long-term melting of West Antarctica, but an immediate acceleration of the melting of these 2 gigantic ice masses, which would mean a dramatic acceleration of the rise of the sea level. And the consequences for coastal areas would be devastating. Devastating for the Pacific Islands, where I was, but devastating for many of the big cities in the world. The majority of the population of the world is by the sea. Cities like Shanghai, Lagos, Bangkok,
even New York.
Yeah. All these cities are threatened if we do not avoid those tipping points, and if we do not avoid a dramatic acceleration of sea level rise in the next few years and decades.
Now, in Tonga, you issued a global SOS on the rising sea levels in the Pacific. Who do you hope will answer your call, or who should answer your SOS?
The big emitters, as I said, those that are dramatically impacting on climate. The fossil fuel companies, many of them, but above all, the countries themselves that need to have plans and projects to reduce emissions, to put a price on carbon, as I said, have plans to phase out fossil fuels, to avoid deforestation, to guarantee an adequate use of land. There are so many things to decarbonize the industry, the transportation, many other sectors. I mean, everything that needs to be done in order to make sure that we stop the present growth of emissions and we drastically reverse it.
Right, but this message that it's time to phase out fossil fuels, it's time to take more climate action, it's not new. And you've used some pretty dramatic language to try and galvanize deeper climate action, right? You said that we need an exit ramp off the highway to climate hell. You said we've gone from global warming to global boiling. Have any of these warnings garnered the kind of real change that you want?
Well, we are seeing a lot of changes. We are seeing not enough change, but we are seeing a lot of changes. Look at the huge increase in renewable energy that we are witnessing. The biggest increase ever in any form of energy, especially the production of electricity. Look at electric cars. I mean, in China now, one in each two electric cars that are sold, one of each two cars that are sold is electric. Look how science is evolving so quickly. So the question is not the instruments available, the science available, the question is political will. The only thing we need is the political will that is needed to use the instruments we already have to make sure that we reverse the present trend, to use those expressions that you mentioned, that would lead to hell on earth.
Now, I want to ask you a question about the Association of Southeast Asian Nations. You have called on ASEAN to help end the global climate gridlock, saying it's its moral authority to do so. What did you mean by that, especially given how this region faces its own climate changes and its own challenges in decarbonizing?
This is one of the areas that will be more dramatically impacted by climate change.
Yes.
And it's not an area that is contributing decisively to climate change. So as an area that is suffering more than many others because of the impacts of climate change, and will suffer even more if things go on as they are, this region has a huge moral authority to tell the polluters, stop.
Okay, one last short question. What can a small country like Singapore do to be a bigger part of the solution? You met with some of the government officials during this trip. How can Singapore play a bigger part?
Now, Singapore plays an extremely important role in the United Nations. Singapore is one of the most active countries in the United Nations. Singapore was decisive in the reforms that we have been able to introduce. Singapore is decisive in our climate campaign. Singapore is decisive in the preparation of the Summit of the Future in relation to the governance of artificial intelligence, in the relation to the reform of international financial architecture, in relation to a new agenda for peace. I mean, Singapore has been in the front line of the voice of reason. And Singapore presides the Forum of Small States. And based on that, Singapore has been able to mobilize the majority of the countries, small states, but each country one vote, the majority of the countries of the United Nations, in order to make the United Nations a strong instrument to protect the planet and to create more equity and justice in the relations among countries and among people.